This block that we're building for my new S14 is actually the block from my Falcon Tires S14. We've been using that block in 2014, 15, 16, and this engine has been my luckiest engine ever. So we just upgraded the block to billet main caps, poured it out to 87 millimeters. We're going to be running GE pistons, BC Moore connection rods, ARP bolts, ACL performance engine bearings, which we've been using in all of our engines over the last number of years. And yeah, here are the rods out. They're all ready, clean. ACL bearings ready and clean, and the bolts cleaned up, ready for lubrication. And tomorrow we're going to be getting the G pistons ready, cleaned up, checked. Mike, my brother, he's been building all of my engines since I started drifting, really. So yeah, like 13, 14 years of building my engines, and he is excellent. Like, he builds a lot of engines in this room at the moment. You can see this sweet 2JZ that he's building with this massive, I've never seen an intake as big in my life. I can fit my fist and my whole, like, whoa. That is the biggest intake I've seen. This 2JZ is for a Toyota Supra, which is actually out in the workshop now. It's going to be a fast street car. The customer is aiming for over 1,000 horsepower. Head is all CNC ported, like the head we're going to be using, which is this head here. You can see the CNC porting is unreal. Yeah, it makes a huge difference to power and also the temperature that the engine runs at. What else do we have in here at the moment? We have this 1JZ build. Here we got an RB30 engine build, which is at Ford Cosworth for any Ford fans out there. So a real selection of motors here. So let's get stuck straight in. Here we have the block. Mike is dropping in all the ACL Race Series bearings. Block has been cleaned, prepped, ready to go. Once all of the main bearings are installed in the block, Mike then goes and uses assembly lube to get them ready, and then we're ready to drop in the Toyota 2JZ crankshaft. We've been using the stock Toyota 2JZ crankshaft in all of our drift cars, in Formula Drift in the US, in all of my cars in Europe over the last number of years, and we find them really nice because you can rev the cars quite high on the standard stroke. Next up, Mike is running in the ARP main studs by hand. Once he has them all ran in by hand, he will then give them a little nip with a quarter drive ratchet. In the meantime, Chris is helping out my nephew, prepping all of the washers and the nuts for the bolts, and then we're ready to install the main caps and bearings. In this particular build, we're using Titan Motorsport billet main caps, which are substantially stronger than the stock Toyota ones. We often use different brands. We've used Real Street Performance as well, so any good quality billet main caps is a major upgrade for the 2JZ engine when you're running big power. So when Mike has all of the billet main caps installed, he's putting on the ARP washers and nuts, runs everything down by hand, and then starts torquing it up for the very first time. This is quite a slow process, but also one of the most important processes of building an engine, because you want to make sure everything is right, torqued down correctly, feeling nice by hand, and yeah, then we're going to be getting on to measuring the bearing clearances. Here you can see how free and easy the crankshaft is spinning in the block after being torqued down for the first time. This is a great sign and something you want to see first time. Mike is just laying in the Plastigauge now, which is a small little strip of wax. Mike uses Plastigauge to double check all the bearing clearances from the machine shop, just to make sure everything is within spec. Then pop on the main cap again, run it down by hand, torque it up to the spec. Then you crack it all off again, take them off by hand. Lift off the billet main cap, and you will see once the cap is removed, you can see how much the wax is after crushing. Then you can go ahead, get your Plastigauge piece of paper which has all the different measurements on it, and that gives you the actual oil clearance on the bearing that you have. After measuring all the main bearing oil clearances, everything measured up sweet, and we're moving on to installing the pistons to the rods. Once Mike had all the piston rings fitted to the piston, he then uses this ARP piston ring compressor, which is really nice. It's a 87mm size because we're running 87mm JE 10:1 compression ratio pistons. He then installs the ACL Race Series bearing, and then you're ready to sit the piston down into the bore for the first time. Once this is sitting in there nicely, you just check the cylinder wall, make sure there's no scratches, you know everything went in fine, then it's the very same process for the rest of the pistons. Spin the block over, then you're ready to sit on the BC rod cap. lubricate the cap, sit in the bolts, run in the bolts by hand at first, then you're almost ready to torque it up for the very first time. Once it's torqued up, Mike uses the same process as with the billet main caps to measure the bearing clearance using plastic gauge. So same thing, torque it up, pop off your rod cap, then you see your plastic gauge, measure it up, double check the oil clearances to make sure everything is spot on. Then on to the final stage. Once we're happy with all of our oil clearances, Mike uses the rod bolt stretch gauge to check the stretch of the rod bolts. You check them in a relaxed state and then check them when they're torqued up. Make sure they're within the spec. Everything measured up really nice in the bottom end. We're then ready to move on to our head. The head we're running is a CNC ported Toyota 2JZ head, non-VVTi. We're running BC 276 cams, BC 1mm oversized valves, BC dual valve springs and titanium retainers, and also BC cam pulleys. So after getting all the head work carried out at a head specialist, including the CNC porting, installation of the valves, we put the head on the bench, installed the cams, and just double checked all the valve clearances to make sure everything was within the Toyota spec. Everything was perfect, and we're then ready to place the head onto the block. We're running a standard Toyota 2JZ multi-layer steel gasket. These are absolutely brilliant from the factory. Toyota really knew what they were doing with the 2JZ engine back in the day. Once that was sitting on, we then got the head, took it off the bench, and myself and Mike are just installing it. And very simple process, but really nice to be laying it all together. This is a big point of the engine build, is when you're happy with the block and moving on to finishing off everything else. Once the head is sitting on there nice, it's then time to get your ARP head stud kit ready. We're using a standard 2JZ ARP head stud kit. Grease up everything, drop your washer on first, then down with the stud, and then finally the nuts. Run everything down by hand, give everything a nip. Then you're ready to run down all of the nuts, and then finally torque it all up over the 3 stages to the recommended torque settings. Next up, we're installing the BC 276 cams. Starting on the exhaust side, just lay it in place, then lubricate it. Then onto the intake side, same thing, lay it in place, lubricate it. Dropping on the cam caps, and then gently walking the cam in. Taking your time, moving from cap to cap, as you have to be careful here, as you are opening some valves while doing so. Both cams fitted into the head. Really nice stage of the engine build. Next up, Mike fits the oil pump. It's a standard Toyota 2JZ factory oil pump. The oil is coming out the side of the oil pump where the blue fitting is, instead of coming through the factory oil filter housing. Next up, we're fitting some external parts, fitting the Rad Industries water inlet, and it's also the bracket for the alternator, and also the Rad Industries water outlet on top. So next we're on to installing the front sump, Toyota 2JZ, using a high quality gasket sealant. Laying the pan in place, tapping it down over the dowels, sits on there nice and easy. One last look at that sweet 2JZ bottom end. Then Mike likes to use socket head cap screws in stainless steel. It looks really nice to dress up the outside of the engine. Run everything down. Then we're on to installing this Tomy baffle plate. It's a really nice setup. Helps with oil starvation with high G-forces when cornering, and especially very useful while drifting. So very impressive, tidy piece of kit. See you next year. It's a nice stage of the engine build, dropping the sump pan on, and hoping not to see it for a good while again, but we've been really lucky with these engines over the years. BC cam pulleys fitted, Rad water inlet, alternator bracket and outlet. Really nice billet alternator bracket, looking good. So here we're fitting our Gates Racing timing belt. Really nice stage of the engine to be at, and once it's fitted and you have all your marks right, you want to make sure you turn the engine over at least 2 times to make sure everything is right. And then on with the timing cover on the lower side, and then we're putting on our Hypertune intake manifold, and Mike is placing on the Titan Motorsports ATI bottom pulley, and then we're on to the cam covers. So really the outside of the engine comes together a lot quicker than the inside, so it's a great stage of the engine to be at. So we are really nearly there with the engine. Front cover to sit on, turbo to sit on, both manifolds are on for good, cam cover on for good, and man, it's starting to look absolutely amazing. Huge thanks to Rad Dan for helping me out with a lot of parts. We got a Toyota 2JZ head off him, and also his Rad Industries top water outlet and his water inlet, which is absolutely awesome. It's this billet piece alternator bracket here. Your water goes in here, and instead of cutting into your cover, which we used to do before, water in the side, then it's machine, so the water goes through this machine piece and straight into the engine in the middle in the original hole. So really tidy piece of kit. With that, yeah, so she is looking good, and we're going to be fitting this tomorrow. She is pretty much all dressed up now, ready to drop into the car. Really happy with how it turned out. The last few bits add so much to the engine. The Hypertune intake, Hypertune billet rocker covers, BorgWarner on there, TurboSmart wastegate, and yeah, we're pretty much ready to go straight in. Just about to fit our DC power alternator. What a sweet piece of kit. So it's going to look lovely with this on. So that's her fully dressed, fully finished, and huge thanks to my brother Mike for building another sweet engine. It made 790 horsepower on the dyno, and it feels amazing to drive. So anyone looking for an engine in the future, feel free to give Mike a shout. So that's it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this engine build video. I tried my best getting as much footage as possible while Mike was building it. It was a really busy time for us, so some of the shots are a bit shaky and stuff, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. It's very exciting times for us now. This time next week we're going to be flying to Russia. We got our visa. The car landed in Russia today, and it's already at the track with Daigo's car. Charles's car is almost ready, so extremely exciting times. So stay tuned over the next few weeks. There's going to be a lot of stuff happening, and we'll be taking you every step of the way. Take care, guys, and thanks for the support.